What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with TechDaily, and in this video, I'm going to give you my picks for the best Samsung phones you can buy right now for under $500. Now, I did just do a video where I talked about the best phones under $300, so definitely check that out if you're looking for something more affordable. For this video, I wanted to increase the budget just a little bit, so we're above $300, below $500, and you can actually get some really good devices if you have that little bit of extra cash to spend. I also think that $500 is that sort of sweet spot in general. It's not so crazy expensive. It's like half the price of today's current flagship smartphones. And the devices I chose for this list are actually both current and older devices. Even some of this year's Samsung smartphones are heavily discounted thanks to just a ridiculous depreciation curve that Samsung suffers from. So there are some deals to be had, to say the least. Best of all, these phones still have a lot of life left in them. So don't think you're getting an old device that you'll barely use for a year. I could see hanging on to any one of these phones for another few years at least, with major Android updates still to come. So they're great long-term investments as well. I'll of course have links to all these phones down below in the video description, so any deals, discounts, or special pricing that I mentioned, I'll be sure to link to it so you can take advantage of it. And actually, in addition to snagging a great deal on a smartphone, if you're in the market for a new wireless carrier, I'd highly recommend checking out Tello, who were kind enough to sponsor this video. Tello offers affordable and customizable phone plans, so you pay for exactly what you need only when you need it. Tello offers unlimited data plans starting at just $29 a month, which by the way is cheaper than ever. They just lowered their prices. Tello offers 4G LTE and 5G coverage nationwide, so you get the same great coverage as those big wireless companies at a fraction of the cost. You also get free hotspot and Wi-Fi calling and international calls to more than 30 countries. There's no fees, no commitments, you can cancel at any time or make adjustments on the go, and Tello also makes it easy to bring your current phone on over. Most GSM or unlocked devices are eligible, and you can check their website to see if your device will work. Tello offers the most flexible and affordable phone plans out there, and they're highly rated by their current customers. Create a custom plan and see how much you can save at Tello.com, or click the link in the video description below. And thanks so much again to Tello for sponsoring this video. So first up on the list, and this is going to shock some people, is the current flagship Samsung S22. Now you might be thinking, how could a current flagship device that's supposed to retail for like $800 or $900 be on this list of sub $500 phones? And the answer to that question is, of course, Amazon Renewed. You can get a lightly used but freshly refurbished S22 for $375 right now, which is just absolutely bonkers. It's far and away the best deal on this list. And like I always say in these videos, don't be scared of Amazon Renewed devices. They are perfectly good phones, and if something goes wrong, you just send it back. Now, there's not much more to say about the phone itself. Obviously, it's this year's Samsung flagship smartphone, so it's of course going to offer the best display, the best specs, the best camera, and plenty more years of major Android updates and software support. It's not even a full year old yet, and the rumored S23s have barely been leaked. Yet somehow, this phone is selling for a fraction of its current full retail price. It's honestly pretty crazy, and I would normally never recommend a current flagship phone to most people. There's not really any reason to buy the latest and greatest anymore, especially not every single year. But for this price, it's an absolute steal. This is just a prime example of the crazy depreciation these Samsung devices suffer from. But for those of you who have been patiently waiting for a new device, now is the time to get one. Please don't pay full retail price for a new S22. There's no reason for it. Get one from Amazon Renewed, save your money. You'll end up with the same great device in the end for a killer deal. Next up, we have sort of the forgotten FE, the S21 FE. Now, this phone was originally supposed to be the long-awaited and much-hyped successor to the best phone ever made, the S20 FE, but it suffered from mysterious production delays that wound up pushing its launch back too many months, to January of this year. Yes, this is another technically current Samsung phone, which makes no sense. This phone should have launched in the fall of 2021, and because of all that mess, its price was just way too high. Its specs were also not comparable to the 2022 devices, and Samsung launched the flagship S22s basically a week later. The completely botched launch of this phone made it a no-go for me. I couldn't recommend it at the time. It made no sense to buy, but now you can buy it for just a smidge over $300. And all of a sudden, it's an incredible deal now. If you ignore the S22 lineup, the S21 FE is a really well-rounded device, practically a flagship in its own right, with a 120Hz dynamic AMOLED screen, 2400 by 1080 resolution. It's bold, it's bright, it's sharp. It's a good looking phone, and it's powerful too. It has the Snapdragon 888 inside, 6 or 8 gigs of RAM. Its cameras around back are just as good as what's on most flagship phones. It may have one less major Android update than it should, but besides that, it's still a good multi-year long-term device, even if you bought it today. It's still not even a year old technically, and all in all, it now makes plenty of sense to buy it. I don't necessarily think it's as good of a deal as grabbing an Amazon renewed S22 flagship, but if you only have about $300 and can't justify another $75 or $80, then the S21 FE is absolutely still a great deal. So if you want something better than a flagship, an ultra powerful device, last year's S21 Ultra is now a sub $500 phone. This to me is probably the most surprising device on the list. The S21 Ultra retailed for $1,200 on launch, and now, not even 2 years later, you can snag it for less than half price. That's unbelievable. Obviously, with this phone, you're going well beyond the usual flagship specs. The extra large 6.8-inch display offers you a QHD resolution 3200 by 1440 panel. It's a dynamic AMOLED screen, 120 Hz, better than even this year's S22 flagship. It's got a Snapdragon 888, it's got 12 gigs of RAM, it's got the 108 megapixel camera and the telephoto lens with crazy zoom capabilities, a huge 5,000 milliamp battery inside to power it all. It's the kind of phone for someone who doesn't just want no compromises, but who wants the specs and features that go well beyond even some of the highest end phones on the market. Samsung's Ultra devices are obviously for a very specific kind of smartphone user. Most regular folks won't get much use out of all those crazy features, but for the handful of people who want the fastest, most powerful, most capable device with all the bells and whistles, this is it right here. And if you were patient enough, maybe you have a previous Ultra device or an older Note device and want something similar but don't want to shell out 4 figures to get it, now is the time. Your patience paid off. For under $500, this phone is just a crazy value, and it'll probably end up being like a 5+ year device. Like I said, even today's $700 to $1,000 devices don't compete with this phone spec and feature wise, so it's probably the best long-term investment on the list as well. Next up is something that may be a little controversial, but for well under $500, you can now get the Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 3. This is last year's foldable, or flippable, I should say. And whether you think folding phones are the future or not, one aspect that's probably kept a lot of people out of the folding phone revolution has been the price. This was nearly a $1,000 smartphone not that long ago. And if you're maybe more worried about durability than anything else, this price point now I think should help ease those concerns. As a phone, the Z Flip 3 is solid. The display is the same dynamic AMOLED 120Hz panel from the flagship S series, 2640 by 1080 resolution. It's bold, bright, sharp, it looks great. The phone is powered by the Snapdragon 888 5G chipset and 8 gigs of RAM. You don't really get that over-the-top S series camera setup, and yeah, the battery inside this phone is a bit smaller, 3300 milliamps, but what you're buying here really is a revolutionary new device that breaks the mold of current smartphones. It's a fun, flippy phone that takes the traditional smartphone form factor and makes it smaller, more comfortable, more pocketable, and best of all, yeah, it's still a chunk of change even at $400 or $500, but if it ends up breaking or the crease gets too bent over time, I'm gonna cry a little less since I didn't pay over $1,000 for it. I don't think this phone is for everyone. It's probably only for a handful of people really, but if you've been waiting for prices to come down on these foldable, flippable phones, it's happening. And the Z Flip 3 right now is the best option out there when strictly looking at price. Last but not least, we have yet another Ultra device, the Note 20 Ultra. And seeing this phone at well under $500 really surprised me. This was another 4-figure phone not too long ago that's now less than half the price. And with this, you get those better than flagship features and specs in addition to the S Pen and all the stuff that goes along with it. So as a phone, this thing is still killer. Keep in mind, it's not as old as like the S20s. It came out in the fall of 2020, so it's a few months newer, and you get really everything you could want, and then some, even by today's standards. The massive 6.9-inch screen is a dynamic AMOLED panel, 120 Hz, with the option to opt for QHD resolution. It's powered by just ridiculous specs, 12 gigs of RAM, the Snapdragon 865 5G Plus chipset, which, to be honest, isn't that much worse off compared to today's high-end processors. Performance has been less and less of a concern, in my opinion, over the last few years. You've also got some ridiculous camera features here, the 108 megapixel main lens, the 50 times super zoom with the telephoto, 8K video recording. There's a 4500 milliamp battery, wireless charging, reverse wireless charging, and this phone launched prior to Samsung cheaping out and making everything plastic. So it's got a glass-on-glass front and back build, stainless steel frame. Looks nice, it's super premium, and obviously the reason to buy this phone in particular is the S Pen support. Samsung hasn't done a whole lot to change or otherwise improve the stylus experience, even on today's Ultras. So what you get here is comparable to what you'd get now, and for the writing and drawing and apps that go along with it, there's no better device on the market. This is another one of those phones for someone who wants it all and then some, and if you have an older Note device, or even like a Motorola Stylus smartphone, for example, jumping to this instead would be a massive upgrade. It's also, I think, still a good long-term investment, even if it is at the end of the road for major software updates. It gets Android 13 at least, so it'll still feel new and fresh for now. So there you go, those are my picks for the best Samsung phones to buy right now, under $500. Honestly, Samsung phones depreciate so quickly that you could get any one of their devices for that price, I think. Even the new ones, if you just waited a couple of months, which is sort of sad, but good things come to those who wait. If you've been patiently holding off on getting a new-to-you smartphone, now is the time to buy, with plenty of amazing options, even this year's flagship phones at crazy good prices. But what do you guys think? Is there a different device out there right now for under $500 that I maybe missed? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, of course. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video though. Be sure to follow TechDaily on Twitter and subscribe to the TechDaily YouTube channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys later.